We think of quarantine as a modern invention, something doctors came up with after they understood viruses and bacteria. They did not. It was invented 6 centuries before anyone knew what a germ was, by merchants in a city built entirely on water, who had no idea what they were actually fighting. And it worked anyway. The word itself is a number. Quarantine comes from the Italian quaranta giorni, 40 days. That is not a metaphor. That is a literal sentence handed down to thousands of people who had done nothing wrong except arrive on the wrong ship at the wrong time from the wrong port. The place where that sentence was first carried out still exists. Most tourists sail past it without knowing what is buried beneath the grass. In 1347, ships from the Black Sea brought something into Mediterranean ports that no one had a name for. Within 5 years, the Black Death had killed up to 1/3 of Europe's population. Nobody knew what caused it. The leading theory was bad air, miasma rising from rot and filth. Nobody suspected the rats. Nobody suspected the fleas. But one thing became obvious very fast. Sick people, near healthy people, meant more sick people. In 1377, the city of Ragusa, modern-day Dubrovnik, then under Venetian influence, issued an order. Anyone arriving from a plague-affected region had to wait 30 days outside the city before entering. It was the first official quarantine law in recorded history. Nobody could explain why it worked. They just knew that it did. Venice had the most to lose. It was the busiest trading port in the Mediterranean, ships arriving constantly from the Ottoman world, North Africa, the Black Sea. Every ship was a potential delivery system for the disease nobody understood. If Venice didn't solve this, Venice would die of its own success. In 1423, the Venetian government converted a small island in the lagoon into something the world had never organized at this scale, a permanent hospital exclusively for plague victims. The island had a church on it dedicated to Santa Maria de Nazareth. Over time, Nazaretum twisted into Lazzarettum, partly influenced by Saint Lazarus, patron saint of lepers. That word, Lazzaretto, is where we get the English word lazaret, a plague hospital named almost by accident that gave language a new word for isolation. This was, as far as historians can tell, the world's first dedicated quarantine island. But a hospital only treats people who are already sick. Venice needed something that worked before anyone showed symptoms. That's where the number comes in. Ships, crews, and cargo arriving from suspect regions were held for 40 days before being allowed into the city. Quaranta giorni. Nobody in the 15th century knew why 40 was the right number. They didn't know about bacteria. They didn't know about incubation periods. They picked it for reasons rooted in religious tradition. Lent, the 40 days Christ spent in the desert. But by coincidence, 40 days happens to be longer than the plague's incubation period of 2 to 6 days. And it's roughly enough time for infected fleas, without a living host, to die out on their own. A number chosen for theology turned out to be correct for epidemiology. They got the right answer for the wrong reason, and it didn't matter. It worked. By 1468, Venice realized one island wasn't enough. They opened a second, Lazzaretto Nuovo, this time not for the sick, but for prevention. Ships suspected of carrying the disease were redirected here before they ever reached the city. Crews and travelers were held in over 100 rooms. Cargo was unloaded into massive warehouses and fumigated with rosemary and juniper. Herbs, they believed, could cleanse the air of disease. They were wrong about how the herbs worked. They were right that something needed to be done to the cargo before it touched the city. Goods, not just people, can carry death. And Venice figured that out without microscopes. The final layer wasn't an island. It was paperwork. In 1485, Venice established the Magistrato alla Sanità, a permanent government health authority, not a temporary emergency committee, a standing institution with the power to inspect ships, enforce isolation, and override merchants who didn't want their profitable cargo sitting in a warehouse for 40 days. This is the detail that makes engineers and historians stop and stare. Venice didn't just react to one outbreak. It built a system designed to outlive the people who built it. Here's the number that confirms it actually worked. Over the next 3 centuries, the plague broke through Venice's defenses only twice, in 1575 and 1630. And both times, It arrived over land, not by sea. The system designed to stop ships did exactly what it was built to do. For 300 years, none of this was bloodless. Since 2004, archaeologists digging on Lazzaretto Vecchio have uncovered more than 1,500 skeletons. During the worst outbreaks, the island recorded as many as 500 deaths in a single day. Bodies were buried in layers, graves reopened again and again because there was no time to dig new ones. The remains tell their own story. Bone analysis shows people who ate like nobles next to people who ate like the poorest laborers in the city. The plague didn't check anyone's class before it killed them. And on this island, for once, neither did the burial ground. This wasn't a clever historical footnote. It was thousands of people who never left that island alive so that the city behind them could keep functioning. Every single time we use the word quarantine about a virus, a sick pet, even a corrupted file flagged by antivirus software, we are repeating an Italian sentence for 40 days, a number picked for religious reasons by a government that didn't understand the disease it was fighting, on an island most of us will never visit. They didn't have microscopes. They didn't have germ theory. They had a number, an island, and the discipline to enforce both for 300 years. That is the part Venice got right, centuries before science could explain why. There is another place where a number, picked for reasons no one fully understood, turned out to protect people anyway. And it's hiding in nearly every building we've ever stood in. That story starts with a Roman architect, a wall thickness nobody questioned for 2,000 years, and a structural rule that's still saving lives today. That video is next.